Ladies and gentlemen, we ask you to turn your attention to the stage. The session is about to begin.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Marguerite Pigott, and I'm Vice President of Outreach and Strategic Initiatives for the Canadian Media Production Association. And I had the great privilege of leading the team that produced Primetime this year. And on behalf of the team, I get to say what a delight it is to see you all here this morning. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Primetime's 20th anniversary this year. And so we wanted to build upon the strengths of everything that Primetime has become, and we wanted to try some new stuff. So before the conference begins, it's important that you know what some of that new stuff is. First of all, this year we had an advisory board. So whether they were helping us with guiding the programming, populating the panels, sponsorships, marketing, they were generous, they were insightful, and we are extremely grateful to our wonderful advisory board. Earlier this year, we also crowdsourced your opinions about Primetime and found out what you wanted. Some of you said you wanted new formats, and so we listened to that. So we've programmed the Lunch With program, we've programmed the Idea Blast series of talks, and we've also programmed a new workshop this year, and you'll be hearing more about all that stuff later on. Also, through the generous support of the Canada Media Fund, we're live streaming portions of Primetime this year, 2 panels and two speeches. And we're thrilled about this. We're doing this because we want to build more of a community. We want to make the whole thing more permeable. And so we really hope that you'll support that by letting your colleagues know at home that we're doing this and by tweeting it. To join the live stream, all anyone has to do is go to our website, primetimeinOttawa.ca, and click on the live stream button, and you're in. So we hope that you will do that, and they can ask questions live over Twitter so they can participate as well. We also redid the app this year because we really want to treat it as a value add. We want to extend the conversation that we're all having at Primetime by providing you with additional information on the topics that we're covering. So on our app, you'll find a treasure trove of information. When Michael Hennessy launches our profile report, it will go live on the app. The Content Everywhere report is on the app, data from PwC, so we hope you'll make use of it. You can access it by going to your app store, iTunes, Windows, Google, BlackBerry, and just search for PTiO 2015. And when you download it, log in with your email, and then you'll join the delegates list that is inside the app, and you'll be able to take full advantage of all of its functionality, and you'll even be able to use it to ask questions during sessions and to vote on questions being asked by others. Throughout the conference, of course, we encourage all of you to tweet, and the Wi-Fi is being brought to us by the Bell Fund, so we're grateful to them. Everybody on the Primetime team is wearing a red lanyard, so if you have any questions, you need help of any kind, please just nab one of us. We'd be more than happy to help you. There is actually more stuff to tell you about, but it can wait. At this point, let's get on with the show. Thank you very much, and here comes Primetime.
I'd be getting paid for this, boys. He's from Quebec.
Put the gun down now.
Oh, come on.
Awesome.
maybe it isn't. You can't get any better than that.
Wow.
Best thing that ever happened to the North.
Oh, that was it. Walkie Jack Ricky.
And now, to open Primetime in Ottawa 2015, please welcome Michael Hennessy, President and CEO of the Canadian Media Production Association.
Years of TV in 10 seconds. Okay, welcome everybody to the 20th edition of Primetime. I'm delighted to welcome you all here today, and a special thank you to the Canada Media Fund, sponsor of today's breakfast, and it's a good one, and grand patron of the conference. Thanks to our lead government partner, Telefilm Canada, and patron sponsor, and thanks to our platinum sponsor, Bell Media. I'd also like to welcome those of you joining us today by live stream, courtesy of the Canada Media Fund. You know, 20 years is a long time for an industry to prosper and grow, particularly measured in digital time. But that's nothing. 40 years ago, I was writing job descriptions for Pierre Junot's CRTC. That's a very long time. Dinosaur time. I said dinosaur time just to get ahead of the Twitter gang. However, it does give me a different perspective on all the negativity, particularly online, about broadcasting in Canada. You know, sometimes we forget that communications in Canada is actually a success story. It may not seem that way if you follow the noise around the CRTC's Let's Talk TV proceeding, but it is. You know, particularly when one looks back at the levels of innovation, private investment, and the political will and fiscal incentives that have helped build a uniquely Canadian-controlled communication system for both carriage and content. Think of this. Collectively, our model not only resulted in networks based on principles of universality that connected us as a nation, but we've created a broadcast system with a built-in preference for Canadian creative resources. Now, we've been monitoring that success for almost 20 years through our annual economic report profile that we put out with Heritage Canada and AQTM. And the latest numbers being released today show that our industry generates nearly $6 billion in production activity, and that accounts for more than 125,000 full-time jobs. But make that 260,000 full-time jobs if we count the whole broadcast and film ecosystem end to end. Yet, even as this success enabled us to reflect our unique cultures and stories and created jobs for Canadian talent and crews, it still provided the audience the opportunity for audiences to access the best content from virtually anywhere in the world, even before the internet made it easy. So, a short history lesson from a dinosaur. 1975 meant 12 channels, no satellite, no cable for the North, no pay TV, no telecom competition, no digital TV, no APTN, no broadband, no HD, no PVRs, no Google, no Netflix. Yet we were still recognized as a world leader when it came to innovation in communications, because we were. The internet had not yet given the power to the consumer voice because there was no internet. In fact, even though the record of the long-distance competition proceeding of 1992 was over 50,000 pages, expert evidence from around the world, the word internet never appeared, not once. And I note that only because it's probably harder for policymakers to predict outcomes today than it was 20 years ago. Yet today, the stakes are so much higher. Increased competition and choice, though, has been a constant in our industry for those last 40 years. And the pace of change has constantly accelerated, if incrementally. That was how change occurred prior to the internet going video. But even so, billions of dollars were still being invested annually in digital infrastructure, and regulators kept increasing choices even as new technologies and content appeared. But over all that time, policymakers even as competition and choice increased, did not lose sight of either the principles of universal access, the need for balance, nor the need to help create a space for Canadian creative voices and ideas along with consumer choices. So simply put, from both a business and a consumer perspective, it worked, and Canadians got the best of both worlds. And as a result, communications became both an economic engine and gained global respect for its level of connectivity and innovation. And it's hard to argue that this incremental approach has not resulted in many positives. Let me just name a few positives. Orphan Black, Lost Girls, Murdoch Mysteries, Income Properties, Motive, Map to the Stars, Mummy, Republic of Oil, Continuum, Bitten, Book of Negroes, The Grand Seduction, Heartland, 1902, Rookie Blue, Saving Hope, Vicing, Sensitive Skin, Mr. D, Rick Mercer, This Hour Is 22 Minutes, Dragon's Den, W5, MasterChef Canada, Yukon Gold, The F Word, and The Nature of Things. And the nature of things seems to be the F word these days. Yet for all our achievements, it seems that the principle of having the best of both worlds is under the gun, all in the middle of some of our greatest successes and on the cusp of bringing infrastructure, talent, and money in this country into a position to prosper both domestically and globally in the golden age of television. Now, there's an argument, of course, that Canadians don't have choice. But consider this fact the next time somebody tells you that. Fact. We not only already have access to the best the US and other countries have to offer through our regulated system, but evidence consistently puts Canada, along with the US, as the top consumers of online video in the world. So what does that mean? Simply put, you cannot have that level of online access to content if your mobile and broadband networks are subpar. And you can't have limited choice and still achieve that level of consumption. Period. That's a fact. We have found ways in this country over the last 40 years to foster an Indigenous broadcast market that provides consumers choice of content from around the world without sacrificing the opportunity to serve the needs of the public, citizens, creators, and the unique communities, both for diversity and local content. That is an incredible success story. But the balance required to achieve that objective is now in question. It is in trouble. Constantly adjusting to consumer demand is a prerequisite for success. And clearly consumers want and deserve a better deal on the price side of the equation. But I worry that as regulators work to rebalance the consumer/diversity equation, we're going to lose that balance that took 40 years to build. And losing the best choices Canada has to offer, ostensibly to get more choice, would be a really poor choice indeed. But that's the real risk, unless there are some sound business principles underpinning the Let's Talk TV decisions that come out over the next 2 weeks. So today, the foundation is still solid. New data from Profile in the CRTC is showing that the industry is still robust on the production side, and overall profitable when you look at conventional, cable, and specialty services results combined. But over time, that may become illusionary because the political or regulatory will to create a space for Canadian choices in the broadband world, just as it created a space in the linear, is not apparent. And no, I am not talking about a Netflix tax, but about measures around supporting growth, inward investment, and trade in content creation, and about the protection of intellectual property and territorial rights. This is so we have the opportunity to not just continue to tell our stories to each other, but to sell those stories to the world. I want to see a policy framework that puts as much priority on creating jobs for our kids in the global digital economy, different as that may be, as it did, thank you, that must be the interns over there, but creating jobs for them in the digital economy as it did for creating the opportunity for the content creators here today over the past 40 years. But future achievements need to build off a strong foundation. And it's not rocket science to conclude that while the market for content is increasingly global and digital, traditional broadcasting is still the dominant revenue source for commissioning high-value original content. We all increasingly know that much of the growth in our business will come from addressing the digital market, and that requires a global perspective, because digital is gutting borders. But there's a big question mark right now about how to achieve that, because for many of the enterprises, there is a big opportunity gap between the erosion of traditional sources of revenue to reinvest in growth and the payouts currently available from the digital space for traditional film and TV. Now, I say traditional film and TV, but I'd also say that online, that traditional film and TV are the things that continue to excite consumers. And this opportunity gap, therefore, adds to uncertainty. Right now, we have significant uncertainty for TV producers around their ability to hold on to and exploit the intellectual property and the content they produce. Yet that, for us, is essential to building a sustainable companies with international reach. And that is why our #1 priority at the CMPA is a strong terms of trade regime, like that in the UK, because without it, there will be no independent production sector. It's also why we worry constantly about the details or manner in which the CRTC unbundles, because it's always those details that make or break a policy. And we can't forget, therefore, that in terms of revenues, broadcasters must have the opportunity to exploit their own territorial rights in order to earn an adequate return on investment. Now, the internet is a huge source of opportunity, but also of disruption and uncertainty. But so too is regulation and policy. And that is what really has the industry nervous. We are engaged in a debate about choice when choice has never been greater. As I said, in my view, the debate is really about consumer price, not choice. But it's also about the protection of the ability of businesses to legitimately exploit the rights to intellectual property. For others, it's about limits on market power arising from vertical integration, or for broadcasters and distributors, the absence of scale relative to global players that have a free pass to compete in broadcasting in our country on their terms. Our Getting Ahead of Change panel with industry leaders can fill you in on that a little later this morning. But whatever your point of view, it's hard not to argue that we start with a broadcasting and telecommunications system that is both world-class and incredibly open, incredibly open. Collectively, we have created the capacity to compete on a global stage. So what are some of the key things we need to get right in order to leverage the types of successes we achieved in the last 40 years in order to prosper and grow? We need to look a lot closer from a public policy perspective at export opportunities and incentives in global markets, because the local models are fragmenting due to shifts in content on demand, and going global is going to afford scale. Leveraging the funding and tax incentives we have today can create a huge opportunity to produce leading-edge shows, not just for local markets, but for platforms and studios around the world, just as we have done over linear platforms for the last 20 years. But that opportunity shrinks if we producers are relegated to service producers with no IP, relegated to producing to meet the demands on broadcasters to deliver certain minimum and declining amounts of local content. And that's not to say that the next terms of trade deal won't be different. It will. But there is a risk in a vertically integrated market that the demands to share in more of the IP to serve global platforms will not be commensurate with the willingness to invest more in the marketing and promotion needed to exploit the global opportunity. We need to rethink what we mean and how we measure Canadian content in a global world, where scale often requires global partners. That is a hard but necessary debate, particularly if, as expected, regulation significantly fragments demand and revenue in the domestic space. The greater the fragmentation, the faster we're going to need to think global to achieve sustainability as producers. And we need to get serious about protecting territorial rights, because the exploitation of those rights supports the creation of content, whether you're a producer, a broadcaster, filmmaker, or distributor. And we need to rethink support for public broadcasting if we really believe in the value of local content and diversity, because unbundling will almost certainly reduce diversity in the commercial space. Think about this. If broadband TV and apps are going to be the primary way of distributing broadcast content, perhaps we need to rethink restrictions on foreign ownership, particularly when it comes to carriage. You know, a primary reason for restricting foreign ownership in the past was to ensure a place for Canadian voices and choices in the broadcast ecosystem. Yet it seems clear in the future milieu, public policy will be hands-off when it comes to how the largest online providers in the world operate in Canada. And if the largest content providers in the world can broadcast and distribute on what are going to be the future and perhaps even dominant platforms, we need to ask, why are we still so concerned with protecting our carriers from foreign takeovers? Perhaps we would be better off with fewer restrictions on foreign takeovers in return for such buying carriers and distributors committing to greater investment in and the use of Canadian resources to create Canadian IP for sale around the world. Rhetorical question, but it's worth asking. That may seem radical, but if we're looking at net neutrality now as being the new rule for broadcasting, we might want to consider how to ensure there's a level playing field that supports Indigenous productions across all platforms. After all, the principle of the maximum use of Canadian creative resources is still, as far as I know, a priority under the Broadcasting Act. And jobs in this sector still, as far as I know, remain a priority for government. 15 years ago, the public policy mantra around broadcasting was all about telling our stories to each other. And now, in my view, as I said, it's about selling our stories to the world. Because that is where the market is heading, and because that is the way to achieve scale in a fragmented, unbundled, and on-demand world. So we have to look beyond our borders if we hope to prosper, and that requires scale in terms of libraries to sell, scale in terms of capacity to produce and partner on original productions, and the opportunity to leverage the intellectual property and the content we produce across the broadcast ecosystem. The capacity is in place to do that, but will there be a policy framework to support that opportunity? I guess the answer over the next 2 weeks is the devil is going to be in the details. Thank you. Now, I have I just want to make sure my next gang has already gone up there. So I have the pleasure to introduce Michael Wolff, our keynote speaker. First of all, though, thank you again to all of those listening by live streaming. We'll start again at 9:45 with the panel Getting Ahead of Change. The rest of you have to stay here. We're just, if we gave everything away on the internet, then we wouldn't have a business. Right, Kevin? Okay. When we were planning for primetime this year, Marguerite and I had many lively discussions about how could we set the stage for 2 days to spark interesting debate and conversation about the future of our industry. So it wasn't long before the name Michael Wolff came to mind. Michael's a well-known, cutting-edge journalist after 20 years as a writer and columnist for The Hollywood Reporter, The Guardian, Vanity Fair, New York Magazine, US Today, and British GQ. He is the author of 5 books, including Burn Rate and The Man Who Owns the News, and is the winner of 2 National Magazine Awards. He never fails to speak his mind, prompting at least one interview once to observe, talking with Michael Wolff is not for the faint of heart. So it's no big surprise that his latest, soon-to-be-released book, Television is the New Television, The Unexpected Triumph of Old Media in the Digital Age, challenges many of the assumptions about the relationship between legacy and digital media. So, who better then to take on Michael Wolff than Norm Bolen, my predecessor, a former broadcaster and journalist and now media consultant specializing in TV and online broadcasting and content production. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a warm welcome to Norm Bolen and Michael Wolff.
Morning. I'm not even going to try to take on Michael Wolff. That would be a fruitless exercise. So I'm really
Oh,
here.
go for it.
I'm really here to draw out his ideas as much as possible. So thank you for the introduction, Michael. Michael is seen by many as a visionary and by others as a sort of a provocateur. In the digital industry, people see him sort of as an antichrist or maybe just Satan. Some comments on him: the bitchiest media Bigfoot writing today, an angry man for pay. Gawker.com called him needy and immoral enough to just insult people for attention. So, you know, there are mixed reviews on Michael. I've had the opportunity.
Just let me interrupt to say, that's Gawker saying this.
Yeah. No, as I say, the digital world is not too enamored with Michael's views, generally. I've spent some time with him over the last few days, getting to know him better and getting to understand where he's coming from. So I think you'll find him very provocative and very challenging. Let's start with, Facebook, Google, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. We have all of these digital services, and yet you say digital is a failure. Why is it a failure?
Well, let's look at both sides of this. Let's look at it as a business, and then let's look at it as a producer of content. As a business, there's only one. It has one revenue stream. It's an advertising revenue stream, and advertising rates go down instead of up, which is kind of not only in the long term, but in the medium term, sort of fatal. I mean, look at this. You're selling a product that people pay less and less for. This is a vote of absolute no confidence. That's your business. Your business is that whatever it is, you have a product that goes down and down. It's a commodified product. You can't get out of that. 15 years of this, that you're stuck there. That's number one. The other side is, what do you produce? What's your content? Facebook, it's your news feed. Think of what's in that news feed. Think of that constant drivel. I mean, the digital world can go on and talk about all of the things that it is that it believes it's accomplishing. Social community. I don't know. God knows. Invent a word. But the truth is, you look at that every day, and what do you feel? You feel kind of depressed. You know, there's a thing in the days of the old days of television. Remember television? 1962, New Minnow was the Great Wasteland. Well, I'm going to submit that that digital media is the new Great Wasteland. Television is the golden age. This is as low a form as we can possibly imagine.
So let me challenge you on that for a second. So, looking at ComScore this morning, I'm seeing that people are spending more and more and more time on the internet, watching video, engaging on Facebook. They're spending a lot of time there. They're shifting their entertainment time to these platforms. Why is that not going to be attractive to advertisers and continue to be attractive to advertisers?
Well, I look at why. First thing, that's the digital question. The digital question is always, people are coming here, so advertisers must follow them. Again and again and again. I've been in this business from the very beginning. That's all people have said. 20 years, that hasn't happened. So the better question is, why hasn't that happened? And it's fairly easy answers, because nobody is really paying attention, because the environment is not conducive to selling, inspiring, telling a story. And because fundamentally the medium is organized in a different sort of way. What we've created in the digital space is what we used to call a direct advertising medium. It's always been a reasonable section of the advertising business. It's not brand awareness. It's not aspirational. It's not creating demand. It's an advertising that is really very specifically transaction-oriented. Many examples of this: classified advertising, direct mail. You could go down the list. It's a reasonable business, a business that in my long career no one I have known has ever wanted to be in, because it's incredibly low margin and you're boxed in. This is the thing about direct advertising, is that you can support the ad, but you can't support content. So you're just in the advertising. You're in the direct mail business. That's it.
Let's talk more about the future of advertising. Last night you said we may come to a time when there is no advertising, or advertising literally disappears, advertising as we know it. Can you talk more about that?
Well, I think the question to ask yourself is, when you watch television, do you watch television with ads? I don't think I've seen an ad on television in 5 years. I think that we are quickly moving toward a world in which advertising doesn't, for all of the reasons the list that you can make. We're oversaturated in advertising. We're too smart for advertising. We have the technological ways to circumvent advertising. And advertisers themselves have found other ways to sell their product, to reach the public.
I think CSIS is trying to tap into this. Maybe somebody could deal with that. Sorry, interruption.
Yeah, no. So I think that the logic here is, everybody. It's an interesting existential sort of predicament, because you need advertising to sell things, but you have fewer and fewer people to advertise to, because people just don't. They don't need to see the advertising, and or else they can, in digital space, they can flick the advertising away.
So what does this mean for television? Television is highly dependent on advertising.
No, I think the better question is, what does this mean for digital? Digital is wholly 100% dependent on advertising. Television, at least in the U.S. market, is now 50% dependent on advertising. That's an incredible transformation. Television, the great advertising medium, this free thing, wholly supported by advertising. The thing that really created advertising, the thing that created the consumer society, is now 50% not advertising. It's 50% paid. That is a revolution, and actually I would submit that is the big media revolution of our time, not digital.
So how is television going to evolve in the context of advertising becoming more of a commodity, being less valuable?
Well, again, that's on the digital side. Advertising is a commodity for digital players. Advertising on television is still, especially in the context of premium viewing, is not commodified at all. It's incredibly sought after. There's no programmatic sales for the Super Bowl. No programmatic sales for any of the upper echelon of TV product.
So how do you think that broadcasters should be positioning themselves now in light of what you're saying? What should they be focusing on?
They should be focusing on their paid revenue stream, which they are focusing on, and which is a complicated thing, because it is based on on a complex regulatory structure, a negotiated structure. But I think that is what the industry, again, especially the U.S. industry, is focused on. It's how to get more money out of everybody watching television, which they are, by the way, succeeding at rather brilliantly.
But still the vast majority, according to what I've been able to find in research, most viewers are still watching commercials on television and they're not using PVRs as much as they could be using them. The mass audience is not watching premium TV and paying for it. There is a significant audience for that, but middle America is still watching 14 minutes of commercials an hour.
Again,
how long is that going to continue?
Again, well, I don't. That seems an asked and answered question. For some reason, you have this, a reason that redounds to the incredible benefit of the television industry. You have this immense population of morons still watching ads. That's both bad news and good news. The bad news is, oh my God, don't they know? Hasn't anyone told them? And then the good news is for the television industry that you still have this, certainly in the medium term and maybe the long term, a very, very, very valuable revenue stream that will continue. At some point, it has to end. Those numbers are pretty demographically skewed. So these people who still watch ads, they die eventually, soon. And then their children don't watch ads. If they do, then it really you have to re-examine the entire fate of humanity. But
so let's see if I got this right. The morons who watch ads are all going to die. That's a baby boomer generation. I'm retired now, semi-retired, which has been described to me as pre-dead. That's the new term. So I'm pre-dead, but let's talk about our kids. I have 2 children in their 20s, one is 30s. They're really media savvy people. They all work in media. None of them have cable. None of them watch conventional television. They consume vast amounts of video. They steal content regularly. They can see things somehow before it even premieres on the channels.
Well, let me challenge that just a second, that they don't watch conventional television.
They watch the content.
I'll bet they do.
They don't pay for it.
Really? It's so easy to pay for this now. I think that's an old view. I don't think people are stealing this anymore. It takes longer to steal something than it does to pay $1.99 to Amazon for whatever you want. I think that has moved on, and the figures bear this out. And video, one of the virtues of video is that it has always been cumbersome to steal. It's not like music. But I think the other point is that they do watch television. They just may not watch it through. Let's not confuse. There are when we say television, we mean 2 things. Right. We mean television as a distribution channel, and then we mean television as a much broader content and business model. So it's that side that remains incredibly healthy, robust, growing, developing, and culture shaping. We sat at dinner last night, and what did we talk about? We talked about television shows. We didn't even talk about the business. We were talking about the shows. What happens in this show? And that's what everyone talks about. Nobody talks about, except the people who are getting paid for it, social media, because there's nothing to talk about.
Okay, let's talk.
But think of all that there is to talk about with television. Television has come, in our lifetime, it has gone from the lowest, most uninteresting form of media to literally the most interesting form. Every day there's something new, something that rises to novelistic levels. It is super literate, super compelling, deeply meaningful, dealing with complex things in our life. I mean, you notice, the internet has become, and social media has become this, is very black and white, good and evil, moralistic, reducing everything to the most simplistic level, while television has gone the opposite way. All of the characters are deeply troubled, corrupt, dealing with the true, really the mess of life.
Okay. So the post-moron generation are kids who have no appetite for advertising and are very technologically savvy, would ask the question, well, who's going to pay for the content going forward? Are they going to be willing to cough up the dollars to pay for premium and super premium? Are they all going to become cable subscribers so they can get HBO and Showtime and other premium services? Are they going to subscribe to them? Are they going to pay for them or not?
Well, so far the evidence is an enormous willingness to pay for television. I mean, we've seen the cost of television go up by a factor of, depending upon what studies you're looking at, in 15 years, almost 6 times. I think we are still far from reaching the ceiling of what people are willing to pay, and they're willing to pay because it's incredibly enjoyable, number one. Number two, because it is this necessary cultural currency. If you haven't seen Breaking Bad, who are you? It really tells you, and I think this is the interesting thing, it tells you how to live. It tells you how we are living. I mean, it does the job of, I'm afraid to say, the job that books used to do.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you on that. I find virtually all of my viewing is that kind of television. And I do find it very interesting to watch, and I do find that it is a conversation piece for people. So it's become a very important culturally.
I mean, just think of television as having replaced. I mean, I think movies used to do this. That used to be the thing that created the culture in which you saw in which life was reflected in its truest, realist way, and now that's television.
Well, just to speak about film for a minute as a bit of an aside, some of our people in this room, producers or filmmakers, last night your comment on film was, film is screwed. Would you like to tell us more about that?
Well, I think it is, I think film has features, I think are now a sort of, have become an old form. And the film business, the movie business, has become the television business. I mean, quite literally, every studio in Hollywood makes the overwhelming portion of its money from making television. I think the most original filmmakers are now in the television business. All actors want to be in television. I think the features as a form, as 100 minutes. I think it's awkward to have to tell a story now in 100 minutes, as opposed to 12 hours over the course of a season, which may go into a second and third season. And the movie business has remade itself. It's a different sort of product. I mean, it's a product of it's a franchise product. It's the tentpole business. There are 30 successful movies a year. And that's actually, that very limited business is a good business if you want to be in creating those kind of visual spectacles.
What do you think the future of the film business is?
It's a good question. I have the film business is 30 very successful movies, and then at the top and then at the bottom a slew of independent movies that don't make any money. So the real question is, can a middle be reinvented? Can the $30 to $60 million budget movies come back, and they're virtually gone now. And there's a lot of people experimenting with this, but the question is, has that audience, the $30 to $60 million movie audience, moved forever to television? I think probably likely it has.
Okay, I'm going to go back to TV then. Let's talk about Netflix for a minute. You've had quite a few strong opinions about Netflix. The main opinion, or the main statement, being that Netflix isn't a very good business for Netflix and for its shareholders. I think that's counterintuitive for many people. They think Netflix is a license to print money. And people in Canada have been arguing that Netflix should be actually paying a tax to support Canadian production. And we're saying it's a great business and they're just raking in the dough and they're not contributing to our system. And at the same time, you're telling me it's not a great business.
Let me make 2 points about Netflix. First thing, I think it's really important to remember and to see it as the television business. It's not the digital business. It's not digital media. It has nothing in common with digital media. It's not social. It's not providing user engagement. It's not user generated. It's traditional television made by Hollywood, actually. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the Netflix comparison has to be HBO, because it's virtually the same. It is the same model. And right now they do about the same, HBO and Netflix do about the same on the top line. The revenues are the same. Their cost of programming is about the same, $1.7 billion for both of them. But on the bottom line, HBO makes a $2 billion a year profit. Netflix doesn't make any profit. What's going on there?
So why is that?
The reason is that HBO is delivered by cable systems, and the cable systems deal with user churn, marketing, billing, help, all of these incredibly expensive back-end issues, which Netflix itself has to absorb. So what's Netflix's future? Well, the obvious thing is that Netflix turns around and does a deal with cable providers, making it exactly like HBO and giving it substantially more, meaning that it will be substantially more profitable than it is now. So it is not only offering a television product, but I would argue that it will, in not too long, be adopting a television distribution method too.
So Netflix becomes just another premium service on cable, it's also available online.
Remember, cable is online.
Yeah.
So you only get to online through cable. So that's that kind of convergence and mix-up that is going to make it very, very difficult to be able to go on having this conversation that separates digital and television. Because remember, it's not just Netflix is television, but everybody else in the digital business, what they really want to do is go into the television business also.
Now, at the same time, you have HBO developing a standalone online service. How does that fit into this equation?
Well, I think everybody wants to go where the audience is. So all you're talking about is different. It's essentially a different marketing solution. It doesn't change the product. The product remains absolutely transparent. I have ceased to know where I watch anything. Do you?
Know where I'm watching something?
Yeah. Does it cross your mind that I'm on traditional television or I'm streaming something.
Well, I only have to think about that when I'm searching for the content, but once I'm watching the content, I'm not thinking about it. I don't
Exactly.
care.
Exactly.
As long as I'm getting a good quality picture and the audio is good and I'm not getting disrupted.
Right. So that's what that is what's going to happen with every content delivery system or every content deliverer will be going to every possible delivery system.
Okay. So now you're seeing broadcasters. You told me last night you used to make money by promoting the digital, and now you make money by not promoting digital. So you've had a flip there in your thinking. What was it? What was the tipping point for you when you're thinking about the future of digital, the importance of digital, switched to what it is now? There must have been some formative thing.
It's not. I think it's trying to. Look at it as an investor would look at it. If everybody is investing in something, that's the point when you want to get out. And I think that we're at when I got into the digital business, nobody wanted anything to do with it. And so obviously that had enormous room for growth. Why wouldn't you be there? Right now we're at this moment. I know in the media community that I spend most of my time in, everybody will say the following words to you within the appetizer stage of the lunch. They will say, the future is digital. And since these guys have never known what the future is, you can assume that if they are saying it, it's not the future. And I think we're at one of those moments in which there is too much agreement. When there's too much agreement, that just always indicates that you've reached a top.
Some people who invest would disagree with you. Warren Buffett, for instance, who's made a few dollars in the markets, was asked about whether he would invest in television. He said, why would anyone invest in television? It's not a growth industry. It's not a growth business. You really fundamentally disagree with that, I think.
Well, I don't know the context in which he would have said this. And one of the Warren Buffett things is you go, Warren Buffett, who? I don't actually think that Warren Buffett has ever made a television investment. So that sort of seems to me that partly what he's saying is I kind of missed the boat on this one. Okay. And I'm not going to say, oh yeah, what did I do? But every metric, television metric, certainly over the last 6 or 7 years has been hockey stick-like. Over the past, the past 6 months has been a kind of rocky moment for aspects of the television business. It's partly because the value of most of the big television companies is as high as it is. So was it going to keep going higher? There's going to be some adjustment there, and there are a whole set of reasons to worry. And I think a lot of variables. Advertising is always a variable. I think that there's an argument which I would disagree with, that it is now going to move to digital. I've heard this for 20 years. How is television sustainable as an advertising medium? And I think it's actually a reasonable question because you don't have to watch advertising. And yet it has been sustainable. There has been no flight, let me just say this again, no flight at all to digital from traditional television advertisers. The growth in digital has been from a totally different kind of advertising. It's gotten print advertising. It has gotten the great mass of direct response advertising has gone to digital. The brand building and demand building advertising has stayed with television.
Isn't that changing though with branded entertainment? aren't we seeing more and more brands working directly with producers and putting their content and their advertising and their products online in a mix of entertainment and brand promotion? Isn't that a big part of the future? You're not?
Well, everybody says it is. Right now, it's a little part of the future. I mean, the money that we're talking about is de minimis. Does this change? That's the promise. Remember, digital exists on this promise. I promise you. I promise you this is going to happen. I promise you. And we still wait. Have I seen any nothing? Actually, we can go further than this. All of these promises are problematic at best.
So producers in the room and broadcasters as well have been putting a lot of emphasis on digital on the basis of the promise. They're investing time, money, and effort in at least diversifying some of their business into digital. What are you saying to those people?
I mean, the first question is why? I mean, I know you're surrounded by an enormous amount of pressure to do this. What have you done? What are you doing in digital? That question comes, what are you doing in digital? Nobody is saying, nothing, I'm not going to do anything. They could go, oh, yeah. And then you frumper around and call somebody and hope that what you're doing is not embarrassing. But what has anyone gotten out of it? I don't know.
Okay, that's clear. Look, we have about 4 minutes. We could take a couple of quick questions from the audience, because I'm sure somebody there's got a burning question, but not a statement. Anybody have a question? Anyone? You're a quiet bunch. So that's a very provocative statement. So you're saying basically don't waste your time on digital. It's not going to generate much in the way of business for you. It's not going to make your business much stronger.
Absolutely.
Do you see any utility to it at all for traditional media?
You know, I think it's probably an okay promotional strategy. You might get something out of that. You know, why Disney bought Maker Studios. Largely because to use it as a promotional tool for Disney television and Disney products and Disney brands. Is it, you know, I mean, so in that respect, what is digital? Digital is cheap advertising. So if you look at it as that, maybe. But remember, it's cheap advertising because it's not particularly effective advertising. So I think it's a monster time suck, waste of time.
Okay, where should, I'll just finish up with one important question, I think, for our audience. You're a producer now, you're making television. Where should you put your energy? What should be your priority? Where should your efforts go? If you're not putting it into digital, where should you put it?
Right, into good writing. I mean, what is television, what makes television now? Really good writing, and you know, the payoff is incredible. The satisfaction is pretty great too. It's a kind of a wonderful business to be in. Finally, after all these years of it being a kind of in a business that you had to be embarrassed about, now you can stand up. We got here. Let's give ourselves a round of applause.
Let's leave on that hopeful message. Thank you, Michael. Pleasure. Thank you.
You guys were really great. I was following you on Twitter. By the way, if I'm ADD, that's how I watch TV, is with an iPad on my lap. But we are getting lots of great debate going on. Hashtag capital P, capital T as in Tom, small I, O, PTiO, prime time in Ottawa, hashtag PTiO. Jump in there, start talking. So that was really informative, and before I jump into whelping some people online, I'd just like to say that, you know, the one really big takeaway I got from all of this was that when I was a kid, my mom always used to say, you know, if you keep watching TV all the time, you're going to end up being a moron. And I always thought she was meaning I would have to move next door with the Irish people down the street. Okay, yeah. Yeah, work on it. All right. So I'd really like to welcome back all the participants we have that have been following on Twitter in between the free giveaways that join us on live streaming. You know, being here is still a lot more fun, so we hope to see you next year. But it's probably just as good we didn't stream the last one for the digital crowd. Okay, so really I just want to point out live streaming again is brought to you by the Canada Media Fund. That's good, I'm back on the You can ask questions via our Twitter hashtag capital P, capital T, small I, O. Or for those of you in the room, please feel free to use the microphones in the aisle. I know you have voice. And you know, after the party tonight that's being sponsored by Blue Ant, you're not gonna have a lot of energy to ask questions tomorrow. So today is the day. Okay, back to the Canada Media Fund, who's been such a great supporter. Canada Media Fund provides the financing, tools, and research that's needed to know where our industry and audiences are headed. And this video that you're going to see really kind of inspired me to get off the negative for my speech. It's made for the CMF. And it just gives you a taste of what you see when people ask, who is the Canadian audience and how are they watching what we make? So, cut to the video. And just to remind everybody, those magic words like job, investment, content, creation, our voices, Canada, our stories, the world, digital, the number of jobs that you keep seeing springing up on the wall there are actually greater than the number of jobs you see in forestry or in mining or a whole bunch of traditional Canadian sectors combined. So that's a really important thing to remember. We are the economy, and in a service economy, money is information, and information is the currency of a global economy. So we make information, we tell stories, that's money, that's currency. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, that should take care of that. Just catching up. Thanks for all the fun last night, Norm. Okay, so our next panel has put their finger on the pulse of Canadian broadcasting industry. And what you just saw is happening in the industry. Getting ahead of change is something the industry definitely is preoccupied with, from TalkTV to Netflix, to understanding and creating content for the binge-watching consumer. Our moderator is Lisa de Wilde. She is CEO of TVO, Ontario's publicly educational media organization, and she has spearheaded TVO's transformation to a leading-edge multi-platform operation. Lisa began her career where I met her as legal counsel for the CRTC, eventually became president and CEO of Astral Television, where she helped turn the declining pay TV category into a highly successful branded television network, of which I am still a subscriber. And she is a true innovator and forward thinker, and we're delighted to have her with us today. So welcome to all of you. Over to you, Lisa.
Good morning, everybody. So we have a pretty awesome panel this morning. I think it's been a great kickoff with Michael and Michael. We're not going to spend a lot of time introducing the awesome group that we've put together for this morning, but suffice to say we have broadcasters large and small, we have privates, we have independents, we have public, we have content creators, distributors, so I think we're going to have an opportunity to have a really interesting conversation. Just to sort of set the stage, we have a very vibrant system here. I think Michael Hennessy's overview this morning really set the stage beautifully. But we are also confronting a period of huge change, driven in part by technology and by a fair amount of what I would call politely regulatory and political uncertainty. So I think we have lots to talk about. As I invite my panelists to join me now, I just want to also take this opportunity to do a big shout out to Michael Hennessy for putting on an amazing show this year, but in so many other years, and for really showing such great leadership in what is an incredibly important industry. So thank you, Michael. So with that, we're going to get rolling. You can tell that we did not rehearse this. And part of the chore is that you have to figure out how to get to the chairs, which is no mean feat. All right, Doug.
This way.
You can tell in our rehearsal we really talked substance and didn't really do a lot of process. Thanks everybody for being so adaptable. So before we dive into the big meaty subjects that I know we're all interested in getting to, I want to just kick things off by giving each of you an opportunity in 30 seconds to tell us what you are most proud of. What's the biggest accomplishment in your organization that really makes you feel like hopping out of bed every morning? Do you want to start, John?
I am proud of so much.
We only have one, and it has to be 30 seconds, no more.
Wow. Okay. I am proud of all the great content that we've been producing and developing, creating over the last number of years. But particularly, I'm proud of Walking Dead because it makes us a lot of money.
Thank you. Kevin.
Viewers are responding to our content like never before. So despite all the doom and gloom, ratings are up across the board. We've had the biggest fall and the biggest winter in the history of CTV. TSN is doing just fine and delivered 6 times the audience as Sportsnet on trade deadline day, and that wasn't because of an errant tweet. It was because of the great content. And our specialties like Space and Bravo and E are performing spectacularly. Canadian is performing well, and primetime and news. Amazingly, local news viewership is bigger today than it was 5 years ago. For all demos, even, and I had to check this 3 times, the 18 to 34 demo is watching local news in greater numbers today than they were 5 years ago.
A reason to be excited about the future. Heather.
I'm proud of public broadcasting. I'm proud of radio. I'm proud of being the #1 digital news site in Canada. I'm proud of our prime time schedule. I'm proud of the turn that we're making back to I think what public broadcasting should be about, and our commitment to Canadian creators. So I mean, I'm proud across all our services, radio, digital, and television.
Okay, so Michael, give me one juicy one.
I'm just proud of the fact that we've assembled a team of really smart, hardworking, really intelligent executives and employees. We've got a great team who aren't afraid of the future.
You stole my lines. I was going to say I'm proud of our culture at Corus, and I get excited every day to go to work because we work with great people. We're in a great fun business. We're challenged. We're all trying to reinvent ourselves, but it's the people that really get me excited.
Thank you. You were great. You kept to the time. Awesome. We're off to a good start. So now let's shift gears, but still keeping the answers short because we are just setting the stage. So tell me, and we'll start with you, Doug, what's the biggest challenge that you face in the business today?
Well, for Corus, I think our biggest challenge is how do we achieve a level of scale in a world where scale really matters, both in terms of content acquisition and competing against some of these massive broadcasters, some of whom are assembled here today. So we've chosen to scale in terms of focusing on women and family and kids. So that's where we have to get bigger, because that's the niche that we're going to win in.
Kevin.
Monetization is the biggest challenge. So our business is kind of simple. We have two goals. Create big audiences, and you create content, you commission content, you buy content to deliver big audiences, and then you have to monetize that to pay for it and to hopefully get a return for shareholders. And monetization today is the biggest challenge, and false expectations are being set in the minds of politicians and regulators by a couple of things. Their expectations are being set by, I agreed with a few things Michael said, and I disagreed with some things Michael said earlier. I do think piracy is a really big problem in setting expectations of the cost of content, that it's free. And then the second expectation is Netflix.
You can't give me all of your answers now.
No,
so
it's just two. It's monetization. Now,
Okay.
Two, $8 or $9 a month doesn't pay for the content that people are enjoying today. It just doesn't pay for it. And beyond that $8 or $9, Netflix is an artificial economic model because maybe a third of its business is based on piracy. And so the really sad news is we saw in a memo that was passed around in government recently, oh, the whole world is going to Netflix and going to this over-the-top viewing. And it's really sad that it's establishing the expectation that that kind of behavior is going to be able to support the kind of content that viewers are responding to. There's an incongruity there.
Why are you charging so little for Crave TV?
I'll come back to that. That's
So
a great
Heather,
question.
for the public broadcaster, what's the one biggest challenge?
Well, I have two, and I'm going to take my moment because it's a big panel and everyone here has opinions, so I'm going to steal my time while I have it. I have two real concerns. One is the concern for everyone in this room and for the public broadcaster around content and who is funding content and the available dollars for content. And one of the greatest challenges, I think, of the Let's Talk TV process and the fears that I think everyone's been expressing is around, I think I'm causing a problem with my mic, but I think one of the biggest fears people are expressing is how are we going to find a way to continue to provide dollars for content creation when we are breaking down the system that provides those dollars. And so for us at the CBC, that's even more profound because we've already found that our ability to get our CMF funding, et cetera, is being eroded by a system that decided to sort of deprivilege Canadian on CBC, even though we're 91% Canadian in prime. So that's a concern. And the other concern I have is the broader sort of public policy concern around that arises from the fragmentation of audiences, and Michael referenced it a little bit earlier. We are still one of the very few places where you can have a national conversation about things that matter. And as people fragment and go into their social worlds and their echo chambers of everybody who thinks the way they do, again, if you're putting at risk the places where we're able to have those national conversations, and public television is one of those places. Public radio is one of those places. I think you're at risk of losing something more valuable than you can even imagine at this moment.
Thanks. Michael MacMillan. We have a lot of Michaels this morning.
I guess our biggest challenge, certainly in our Canadian business, is that we don't have direct access to our viewer customers. We have to go through the carriers, and we can't get decent packaging or promotion or pricing. And we don't have any direct access to sell directly to our real ultimate retail customer. And in our other businesses we do, but we don't in terms of Canadian TV. And that's the single biggest problem we have, because we can't sell ads unless we get an audience. We can't get the audience unless we get delivered to that end customer. And we have no means to deal with them directly under the current power relationship in the current regime. And if we could get direct access, that would be so much better.
And I'm curious, you asked me a question, so I'll try and see if I can sneak mine in. Why don't you just go over the top and go direct to consumer with the content and bypass the distributors?
That's a very good idea.
This is panel month, but last week we talked about this too. I'm with you. Building a direct relationship with the consumer is a critical need, especially for those of us who aren't having that distribution pipe. And so I'm in your camp for sure. And going over the top is a strategy for sure. You could do that, but you can't get scale. Back to my scale issue.
You asked me, sorry Lisa, we don't need to take over, you can bounce back. You asked me about Crave TV's pricing and that, and I guess I'd say I've been of your mindset a lot that in the building years of the cable system, the distributors were enablers of access to consumers. They, as your retailer, they gave you good shelf space, they promoted it, they packaged it, they gave you access to consumers and delivered that. In the last few years, as their industry has changed, a variety of conditions have taken them away from being enablers and in some ways made them preventers of getting to the consumers you want. But I'll say that going OTT, direct to consumer, is a very, very cumbersome, difficult, starting from scratch and growing from subscriber one and owning all of that marketing and everything is kind of an equally daunting challenge.
Well, to Michael Wolff's point, is why Netflix doesn't make money.
Right.
There's
a big back end.
That's what they're trying to pay for.
Yeah.
So let's give John a chance. What's your biggest challenge as the content creator, distributor?
Well, first of all, I want to say I need all these people to be really healthy to make sure they buy the content. But my challenge is I need that on a global scale. So, as a content creator, producer, and exploiter, my challenge is competition. There's so many amazing indies and major studios now that are building their businesses on a global scale, entering markets beyond their home territory. And I need to figure out continuing ways to ensure that my content rises to the top and that buyers, these buyers in Canada, buyers in the US, buyers around the world, must have my shows. Because, and I think Michael Wolff mentioned this on his panel or in his talk, right now, one of the challenges we have is what does our content look like? What we're seeing in the marketplace is the high-end content is getting better and better and more expensive and more difficult to develop. So you have to take more risk. Their low-end niche content is an interesting place to be because it's low risk, low return, but there's something interesting about that business. The middle is a scary place to be. And as Canadian producers, we've tended to be in the middle for a long time. And so my concern, my challenge is how do we break out of that?
And that's something, the reason that we launched our premium content strategy in Prime was to try and address that. But it's hard. It's not that I don't have confidence that the people in this room can create that content, but it takes time, it takes nurturing, it takes luck to some degree, and it takes a huge investment in the willingness to fail in order to get success. And that is, I think, one of the greatest challenges that we're all facing is how do we continue to invest in Canadian creators. I believe in it. I think Canadian filmed content is at a point right now where maybe books, Canadian authors, Canadian books were in the 80s and 90s when they kind of hit that global stage and became a thing that people had to contend with in that industry. I think we're on the precipice of that, which is why I'm so frightened about the undermining of the funding model for providing the support to creators to get us there.
So to pick up on John's point about getting global scale for the content that you need to create, how do we do that and still maintain the IP in Canada? Like, what changes do you see as needed to the rules around Canadian content that will really allow you to drive to that global scale? John.
Do you want me to start?
Well, you are the guy.
Well, I would actually argue right now a lot of the IP for the really valuable content isn't necessarily staying in Canada. And I would also argue that the rules actually don't really protect IP ownership. They protect copyright ownership. But you know, more and more you're seeing, and this is the good news, you're seeing a lot of international distributors, financiers, content exploiters from outside of Canada wanting to own Canadian content because they see it as valuable. But the actual rules themselves, in terms of how content is supported, you got the point system, which focuses on the creative elements, but you don't really have ownership rules that really are effective in ensuring that ultimately that value chain from the distribution point of view, in terms of ultimately these high-end shows selling around the world. A lot more and more of these shows are now being owned by non-Canadians.
So when you talk about the need to build that global scale, though, to build your business, what do you need in terms of the regulatory approach, the regulatory rules that will allow you to do that, or are you just going out there and making your deals with international players?
Well, what John said before, he said he needs us to have a healthy business, and I think we are all, for the creators in this room, we're all your biggest champions that you have global success and that your content sells worldwide and that you have a really strong back end. But you can't finance a big expensive show based on the hope of that. You can only finance it based on the health of the domestic industry.
And having that domestic launching pad.
And in every country that has success exporting great content, they really fund the bulk of it. If not 100% of it is funded by a healthy domestic industry. And then once in a while you hit that formula that really nails it globally and you have a big back-end hit. But those are rare. And they're becoming harder and harder. John was talking about, I think all of us are individually, we know there's not enough time to watch all the great content we want to watch. There's good shows failing because there's so much good content coming onto the market. So if we don't have a healthy domestic market, Canada will never, ever, ever, ever have a chance at having an international market.
You need to have real flexibility. One of the things that I think is true is creativity is not just about the script and the storytelling. Well, that's absolutely critical. It's also about how you cut the deal. And we are, the terms of trade conversation, something that restricts the ability to be flexible enough to make good deals. Every deal, every business model behind a hit show is its own work of art. And we need more collaboration with independent producers, and we have to realize, and the term I've used before, and remember at Corus we own Nelvana, so we've been making global co-productions for many, many years, so we're also a content producer. Every single deal we do is like a snowflake. It's always unique, and we're now forced to work within a very confined structure, which I think limits creativity.
What do you think about that, John?
I agree. Look, when we do deals in the U.S., the kinds of deals we do with buyers are all over the map. Sometimes there's straight license fees. Other times there's co-ownership deals. Sometimes we share distribution rights. Sometimes we checkerboard because we have a slate of shows we're doing with them. And I feel right now in Canada there's too much of a sort of a restrictive regime to allow us that kind of creativity that Doug is mentioning to make these kind of deals that will support the entire ecosystem, not just the producer, not just the distributor, not just the creator, not just the broadcaster, but the entire ecosystem has to be healthy. So we need to be able to have more flexibility in how we put these deals together, because when you do have shows that have value, these are assets that we all should be participating in. And these assets are exploited around the world. Canada ultimately is a very small market relative to the entire world. We're creating assets that are seen worldwide, that get exploited over and over again, that are long-running, cash flow opportunities to help build our businesses. And it should be all of our businesses building together. That's what's happening in the U.S. Partnerships galore. And I just find sometimes in Canada you don't see that same level of partnership discussion.
Heather, in terms of the challenges that the public broadcaster faces around Canadian content, do you think there's an opportunity to differentiate the role of the CBC to Canadian audiences by, providing a different, more edgier, more unique kind of Canadian content?
I mean, I think what you want to provide is a content that resonates with Canadians, and so, where I think there is a conversation in the industry around edgy versus non-edgy. For me, it has to be identifiably Canadian. It has to be something that you would not necessarily find on the channels of my competitors, because that's why you have a public broadcaster. So it doesn't have to all be edgy or all be in some category or some genre. What it has to be is uniquely, identifiably Canadian. And then you have to double down on that and have confidence that as a producer, as a creator, that's something that you create that is compelling and Canadian will have success beyond Canada's borders. And I think that's what the Danes have done, and that's what, and this is, to build off of Kevin's point, but how do you create a successful domestic industry? And if you look at the English language market, certainly around the world, having a very, very strong and well-funded public broadcaster is absolutely part of the foundation of that. It is foundational to training creators. It's foundational to supporting the idea that your culture matters and has resonance and has a life beyond yourselves. And it's just critical.
So Kevin, sorry, Michael.
Jump in on that. I think that unless we smarten up and give the CBC long-term, reliable, and predictable funding, we're all screwed. I agree entirely with what Heather is saying. It's fundamental. It's basics. It's table stakes. And I don't think that we're a competitor to the CBC. None of us are. We are beside you or around you, not you personally, but the CBC, what you stand for. But I think that we collectively as an industry have to stop using the CBC as a whipping boy. It shouldn't be. It isn't. It's been central to developing generations of Canadian competitors. We have to stop it and demand. It's a small amount of money per year, folks, per capita, that goes to the CBC. We can't nibble it to death.
So Kevin, just to pick up on, thank you, Michael. Kevin, to pick up on some of the critics out there talking about the need to have, edgy content, and that it's edgy content that will drive viewership. Is that really your take on what drives viewership?
No, I mean, you need good content. Edgy is one category, and I can tell you, my mother doesn't like watching edgy. Breaking Bad turns her stomach. And so there's, you need great children's programming, you need great family co-viewing, and that's not edgy. Co-viewing is one of the more important, demographic categories of content that we can create and deliver. It still needs to be captivating with awesome characters and great stories, but why do we have to have bad words and sex in it to make it good content?
Thank you. So I want to turn back to Netflix and to the over-the-top just to spend a few minutes really getting your perspectives on. So Netflix is here. It's a not insignificant player in our audiovisual marketplace. How do you formulate your business strategy to survive with that kind of an over-the-top player in town? Kevin, you want to take the first one?
Yeah, so for sure we launched Crave TV, which is an exciting initiative for us, and it is one that we decided should be developed in conjunction with the existing TV ecosystem. And so for that reason, we distribute it through Canada's TV distributors, and for that reason, we aren't marketing it or making it available to cord cutters.
And why is that?
Anybody who has a cord can get it. Well, it's for a few reasons.
Okay.
One is because I'll state the most obvious that everybody is going to get. We kind of all have a vested interest in the survival and the success of the traditional linear ecosystem, okay? So we want to do things to enhance the value proposition of being a cable subscriber, and when I say cable, it's cable, satellite, IPTV. We want to enhance that value proposition. But there's a couple of other things that really matter. The content that's on Netflix would not exist. We're all naive. In fact, we're all, to kind of Michael Wolff, we're all morons if we think Netflix would exist without the linear ecosystem. 95% of the content that's on Netflix, Crave, and Xiaomi is from the traditional ecosystem. It was funded there. If they put that out of business, they don't exist. Okay, so you can't have one without the other. The second thing is we decided to make it not about movies and not about kids because we think that there are fantastic programmers who are delivering the ecosystem kids content today in both an on-demand and in a live world. So we wanted to satisfy a gap in the market, which was premium TV on demand inside the ecosystem. And that's what Crave TV is all about, and we priced it aggressively. We did go, $4 is not a standalone make money value proposition, Michael, for sure. But it had to do with our decision to marry it to the ecosystem, that we wanted it to be a value enhancement to that. And so that's why we went there. Crave is just one initiative of many, but I will tell you that, again, you can't say, oh, Crave's going to save. Crave is the solution to Netflix and is going to save it. Crave won't make money on a standalone basis. We have to have a healthy overall traditional, conventional, and specialty broadcasting system.
But your strategy is to support your existing business.
Yeah.
And what about you, Doug, and Corus's strategy to over the top?
We work in Canada. We work with our BDU partners in the ecosystem that exists here. We're supportive of the Canadian ecosystem because we believe that we have to protect the revenue base. Internationally, we license our content to Netflix and Amazon and Love Film. We're active sellers to those folks, and they're great partners of ours. On one hand, our view is that we don't want to regulate Netflix. We want to be less regulated ourselves so we can compete. I think none of us are afraid of competition. I think the note that Kevin had earlier on Netflix, which I think is an important one, is there's a whole bunch of Canadians that access the US Netflix through VPN blockers, and that is fundamentally wrong / illegal. And that's got to be addressed because it's not a level playing field. And at the end, I don't know how we do that, but that's a big issue.
I was going to ask you, so how do we do that?
I don't know. It's a conversation that's pretty ripe right now.
Yeah.
But the truth of it is, I think 1.5 million of the 5 million Netflix subscribers in Canada have access to the U.S. service.
Yeah, well, it's echoes of DBS satellite.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is, Michael. Yeah.
So, Heather, what does over the top mean for the CBC's strategy?
Well, I would say we're over the tops are partners for us. It's we try and get our content onto all those providers. I think if we're not with Crave, we're in talks with Crave. We certainly have content with Xiaomi and with Netflix. I think again I would come back to this challenge. It's not, as a consumer, I like those services. I like to be able to do catch-ups. I like to go back and see a series that I know was critically acclaimed, but that my life didn't allow me to commit to at the time, because you can only commit to a certain number of dramas in your life. But it goes back to something that we talked about last week on a panel that most of us were on around. You are both a citizen and a consumer. And so while I think the services are very consumer friendly, and I think the pricing reflects that, and I think the strategies of going to market and saying here is something you might enjoy and all that kind of consumer driven stuff, at the same time, it is a huge opportunity for piracy circumventing the system, undermining the economic foundation of the system. And we need to have a conversation with Canadians that goes beyond themselves as consumers and themselves as citizens, and says, do you want to have a system in Canada that actually privileges Canadian content and protection of Canadian content and its creation and promotion and distribution.
Michael.
Well, in terms of over-the-top, at Blue Ant, we do intend to launch some new over-the-top products this year, but I'm not here to sort of tout that per se. But I think that what Netflix represents is really exciting, and we're going to see lots of different other versions of so-called over-the-top products in a wide range of categories and different formats, and I think that's really exciting. But I will say that I was heartened by the FCC's announcement last week to enshrine or to deal with net neutrality and bring it back as a key concept. I mean, my view is that we're not going to have successful new products, new apps, new channels, new offerings, unless they do have ready and reliable access. And the internet is now, in my opinion, a public good. It's inconceivable to be living in North America or Western Europe or almost anywhere in the world without ready and available and reliable access to the internet. Just in the same way you would need to have access to, fresh air or clean water. It's a public good and it's a public utility. And it's very, very important that we wouldn't assume that, Ottawa Hydro or Toronto Hydro would only put its own water through its pipes. So that's why net neutrality is a very, very important thing. So the future of all these new products, I think, is importantly improved and reinforced by the FCC's decision last week, and I hope that they go further.
And in terms of the Canadian regime, though, what's your take on where we stand in terms of net neutrality now?
Well, I've long held the view that, 20 years ago, we kind of drew a pencil line down the middle of the page and we said, broadcasters are over here and producers are on that side of the line, and various rules applied if you were on one or both sides of the line. And it made a lot of sense because through spectrum scarcity, there weren't very many broadcasters, or through the fact you had to have a license to broadcast, that also limited it. Now we're not in an age of scarcity, it's of abundance. Anybody can be a broadcaster of some kind because you don't have to do it just the old-fashioned ways. So that line, that dividing the producer from the broadcaster, is an irrelevance now. The real line is between those who have apps or who are broadcasters or are creators and musicians. All those acts of creating and presenting are on one side. And on the other side, where the line should be moved, are the common carriers, are those who actually own the highway.
Well, this is your way to get directly to your customer.
Yes, it is.
But the net neutrality, first of all, I'll say on the part of the U.S., I fundamentally disagree. It was a solution looking for a problem. There's no startup, there's no content provider anywhere who has problem distributing their content. The internet has been operated free and unrestricted and open. There's not favored lanes of speed. There's not content blocking that's going on. So it is a heavy-handed government intervention in a market that is investing tens of billions of dollars finding a solution to a problem that didn't exist. Now, in Canada, I think that I'm very familiar with both sides of the border's net neutrality laws and the proposal in the U.S. And fortunately, I guess, Michael, for your comfort, we already have rules around traffic shaping, around network prioritization, and certainly around content blocking and things of that sort, that the fundamental principles of net neutrality that I think are kind of unassailable, that you shouldn't block anyone's content unless the law says you should, and you shouldn't prioritize anyone's content. But there is an issue that net neutrality misses, and somebody has to pay for the pipes. And there are tens of billions of dollars on behalf of Bell Canada. We're investing almost $4 billion a year, $4 billion a year. In upgrading our infrastructure to keep up with video content traveling over it. Somebody has to pay for that. And I think it's a fair question to ask. Should the consumer pay for it, or should the provider of the content pay for it? The free market would sort out and would figure out the right value proposition, but somebody has to pay for that. In peak periods right now, Netflix represents 40 to 50% of the content traveling on the network. Should they get that for free?
John, back to E1's strategy and over the top. What does it mean for the growth of your business?
Well, it's exciting. The more platforms, the merrier, as long as they are healthy and they can survive and the business model can sustain itself. Right now, Netflix is building scale, they're buying market share, they're adding their services in territories around the world. So on the one hand, that's exciting, and we sell a lot of product to Netflix in terms of acquisitions. We also pitch them on the original side, and they spend a lot of money because they're in that pay service category like an HBO or a Showtime or a Starz. So it's a great opportunity, again, for content creators to find new homes. And then in terms of windowing out rights and trying to maximize revenue for the content around the world, it's not just a Netflix, it's just the fragmentation of the market is actually an opportunity for content owners to really window out and to monetize that content. But Netflix has also changed, I think, the way the business is developing content. I mean, there is sort of a more filmic, indie feature spirit to the way TV is now operating, and it's partly because of the HBOs and the Netflix, but it's definitely generally about a pay subscription view to content, which is, if you're going to pay for content versus watching it with ads, you better have something that's really compelling, because it's so easy just to switch it off. So what's exciting to me about the Netflix world, but the pay service world, is just the creative community that is from film that is now moving into that development space is really exciting. The best writers in the world from around the world are wanting to work in the TV space. The best directors, filmmakers, actors. It's to Michael's point about lines being drawn. I mean, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. The other line that's going away is the border. There are no borders anymore when we make content. And I think that's part of the challenge with the Canadian content system is we've sort of operated in a border. But from a development and production point of view, it's borderless. No one thinks about a Canadian show anymore, or an American show, or a British show. When we're developing something, generally, we just look at, where's the writer from? What's the story? Is it a universal story? Is it compelling? Is it something we think a lot of people around the world are going to want to watch? And we don't start with sort of, is it Canadian or not Canadian? We just start, is it compelling?
Heather.
I just wanted to return to Michael's point a little bit and pick up on it, because I do think that the distinction now is between content curators, creators, promoters, et cetera, versus the gatekeeper. And to Kevin's point, sure, there is, it's a free and open system to a degree, but the vertically integrated companies, in particular the global mega companies, the amount of money you can give to promotion and marketing and how you put forward the choices in front of consumers within that system are also places where the dominance and the potential for abuse is very, very high. And so it's not an
Marketing
equal...
a show is abuse?
Not marketing a show that's yours with the competitive advantage that you already have. And maybe it's a show that you created, maybe it's a show you own, maybe it's a show Canadian taxpayers contributed to. If you are privileging your own content and at the same time saying you don't need any regulation because it's a neutral system, that becomes a challenge for somebody who's not having that opportunity. And it's not, yes, you want to build a competitive advantage for yourselves, and you're doing that, and you're running your business in a way that says, I want to do all these things and invest in all these distribution platforms so that I can monetize my content over all the platforms and I can promote it. But it does place people who aren't vertically integrated at a disadvantage.
Well, scale matters. I would agree scale matters. I don't think vertical integration matters. So, you're combining two things there that I think misses the point. There's no question that for Bell Media, the megaphone of hit shows, creating more hit shows, that is a function of our success. So that scale matters, but I don't think that the VI comes into it. I don't see how that happens.
You invested $5 billion doing that.
In infrastructure.
In buying media assets.
Well, yeah, we bought companies, yeah.
I don't know.
But those companies existed. I would say that CTV was using its megaphone of promotion before Bell bought CTV, Michael.
I'll make a distinction also, not on the marketing side, is the vertically integrated businesses all have that customer relationship, and we had this conversation. It's return path data, set-top box data, IPTV data on what the audiences are doing. That's gold. We live on numeris, and the blunt instrument of measurement and that currency.
Right.
And I think that's that's a distinction I think that needs to be recognized in the scale conversation for sure, and this notion of vertical integration and affiliation and all that sort of conversation. I think it's a really important item, and I'm excited by the information that we may be able to get working with the BDUs in terms of what you're learning out there. But I know that's something that has been tabled for future discussion from the commission. But I think that's a note I wanted to make on that.
So speaking of the commission, we don't have a decision yet, but we all know that the Let's Talk TV decisions will be coming. I'd like to spend a moment talking about the impact that you see unbundling having on each of your businesses. So first of all, just size the amount of risk that you associate with unbundling. Kevin, do you want to start?
There's three things that we should be pursuing in our oversight of the market to facilitate a healthy domestic business. We need a legitimate and secure rights market. We don't have that today. We need a level playing field for all participants, whether they're OTT or linear, whether they're American or Canadian. We need a level playing field, and we don't have that. And third, we kind of need a light touch and a free market approach, because we have to recognize that many of the new players are outside of the regulatory arm, of what the regulator can do. So we need a light touch and a free market approach. I'm not fundamentally at all opposed to unbundling. It's already happening. We're already experiencing the impact of consumer choice as people sign up for, in some cases, OTT products and shift some of their entertainment spending there, and they downgrade their packages on the linear side. So it's already happening. The marketplace is doing it. I think that it's foundationally wrong to mandate it, because I don't think the heavy arm of regulation should do it. The market is doing it. But as part of an integrated solution of legitimate and secure rights market, a level playing field, and generally a light touch, we supported it in our recommendation. The wholesale market needs to be allowed to adapt to unbundling. The kinds of deals that we do to distribute our content needs to now be dramatically overhauled. And so
does that speak to a slow ramp up, the pace of making the change?
I don't know how you really do a slow ramp up to unbundling. It's kind of
more like
binary, on or
yeah.
off. But the wholesale relationship is heavily manipulated, not just regulated, but manipulated. It needs to be more of a free market. Let the market figure out how to distribute the content and pay for it now that we're entering, by the way, unbundling, which is unprecedented anywhere else in the world.
So Michael, what do you think about unbundling and your business strategy?
Well, we are going to a world where unbundling or pick and pay or greater choice of how you watch stuff is happening. It's true on the internet, and it's going to be true in TV, old-fashioned TV land. So we know we're going there, and I presume that some version of that will be in the decision. But for us, the question is, what are the unintended consequences of that? And we currently, if you're not owned by a major carrier, you've got a current problem. And the devil will be in the details, as was mentioned earlier. And unless there are very thoughtful and specific measures included in that decision, many people, including several folks on this panel, could be the unintended direct victims of this. And we could have our business severely impacted because we don't own the pipe.
Doug, do you have anything to add?
I'll just build on that. The commission has said that status quo will be maintained, and I hope that's the case. So, I mean, if the whole universe is that, hey, if we're all unbundled, everybody call your cable provider, your call centers are going to explode, Kevin. So, I mean, I'm trusting that good sense will prevail. How quickly, the a la carte universe kind of rolls out will impact revenue. And then that's going to impact what we spend on Canadian content. And that's going to impact all the producers in the room. And that's just a fundamental fact of life. It's math.
I mean, so to state kind of the obvious, which I think we're all kind of preaching to the choir here, bundling is the economic model that funded this plethora of great content. It was the idea that we all pitched in and paid just a little bit, whether the niche content met our interests or not. And so it's a sound economic principle for financing what has developed into be the greatest variety and quality of content, you know, in history.
Michael.
Kevin is entirely correct. We'll be very careful not to throw out the baby and the bathwater. And also, by the way, when you subscribe to Netflix, I think you're buying a bundle.
You're buying a
A bundle.
Yeah, you're right.
You can't just get old shows, or you can't just get
Right. No,
House of
it's
Cards.
an
You
all-in
can't
package.
just get movies and not TV.
So what are we going to do to promote Canadian content in a world where some of that scale, some of those supports are really at risk? Like if you had one thing we could do differently to get Canadian programs, Canadian series out there and find audiences, what would you do? Let's start with John.
Well, a couple of things. One, I would support the CBC considerably more than what we're doing right now, because I think really the CBC should be supporting the best creative talent, should be the hotbed of creativity, risk-taking, exciting, and, you know, nurturing those next hit makers, whoever they are coming out of the Canadian system. Because part of it is the Canadian brand needs to elevate, the Canadian creative brand needs to elevate. In terms of promoting Canadian content on a global scale, not just in Canada, the content, as good as it is, needs to be better. It needs to be better, and I think one of the ways to do that is I think we need to have more flexible creative rules. I think the system that we've had in place for 40 years, the point system, is too simplistic to determine ultimately what is Canadian and what is not Canadian. And how the world sees Canadian content is not how they saw it 40 years ago. So we need to have in terms of regulation, to the point of almost everyone in this panel, which is a level playing field in Canada, in a way, more free market. That has to also happen in terms of the way we create and produce shows in Canada as well.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on the one thing we could do?
Well, I'm not going to swim upstream against the panel, and I'll say we should support the CBC. But as for the privates, there's for Canadian programming, there's a massive advantage in our ability to schedule, program, promote, and put in a place of prominence in our schedule Canadian shows that get big audiences. For John to be able to sell your shows globally, it certainly helps if he can walk around and say, hey, it's delivering 2 million people in Canada. It's the number 8 show in Canada. That certainly helps you sell it globally. So I think what is a little bit different is in the private, like CTV and Bell Media specialties, we can deliver really big audiences, and we are today. But we need, if it's going to sustain, and I will say, we're at a critical juncture. The frog is enjoying the warm water right now, but it's just about to take our skin off. We need a legitimate and secure rights market. We need a level playing field with all participants, and we need a light touch and a general free market bias.
So to pursue the rights market point, what specifically are you looking for from the regulator?
It's a long discussion. I just saw we hit zero,
Okay.
Lisa.
All right, we'll pick it up. We'll find you again on that one. Heather?
I would say the promotion is critically important. You know, and we don't fund the promotion, right? And so when you have scale, and it's not a criticism, it's an acknowledgement. When you've got 40 channels over which to promote any one piece of content, never mind, you know, an entire schedule, you're in a pretty good place.
Do you
when you've
think
got one
the
channel,
funders should allocate some of the dollars to promotion?
I think it's worth looking at, because I think in a you know, a world where choice is becoming more and more the way that we're presenting the content for people and saying you can pick anything, then you have to break through. You have to be able to tell people what those choices are. So if you can't get the dollars to promote, you know, I am now paying Kevin, you know,
Well, one of his arms.
to promote Canadian content, right? So I'm taking dollars and using them, paying a private broadcaster in order to get people to watch public broadcaster shows. And that's the world I'm in. And I'm prepared to put those dollars against those shows because I believe in it and I believe in promoting public broadcasting, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think it's a legitimate question to say, is there some mechanism by which that activity can be taken into account as well? And you know, I'm very struck by the statistics around content creation where they say that the number of original series has gone up by 400% in the last 7 years. The failure rate's also gone to, instead of 9 out of 10, 5 out of 10 get renewed. So you have more great content being presented than ever before and a much higher failure rate. And part of that is some of those shows just not finding an audience because they didn't have the promotional dollars behind them to even get put in front of audiences. So, you know, one of the things that AMC was able to have this sort of patient capital approach to a Breaking Bad, where it had, as we all know, hundreds of thousands, not millions of viewers, for years. And if you're able to do that, that's fine, but I don't think there's many who have the luxury of waiting for the kind of 7-year cycle of critical acclaim to come into play.
So Michael, you have a pretty interesting spot in the ecosystem. What do you think in terms of the promotion of Canadian content, of the new shows that you're commissioning? Or
Well, obviously, the more we can do, the better. Mm-hmm. But you know, and whether the funders, CMF or others, should allocate money directly for that, as was your question, I'm not sure about that. I mean, there's in this day and age, especially with social media, earned attention is often as effective as paid methods. So there's a variety of ways of doing that marketing. So it's important. Would I direct separate funding to it? I'm not sure. If I can just take 1 second, though, some of the panelists have used the word free market. And I would encourage us to use a different phrase and call it a fair market. A free market suggests anybody can do whatever the heck they want to the other person, unencumbered by rules. That's just a nonsense. We all, in business or in life, agree to be fettered and to be not prevented from doing certain things, and not to say, just because I'm the biggest guy or the fastest guy or whatever, I can do whatever I want. You don't dump your waste in the river from your factory. We don't have free action in all those ways. So I would encourage us to think about fair market and a fair marketplace, because the word free market suggests that one can do whatever the heck one wants.
Doug, in terms of Canadian content?
I think the focus...
You get to back cleanup.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to back cleanup. And just a quick fact, Michael Wolff was asking about Warren Buffett. He did own a media stock, and he sold it, Disney. He got it through ABC Cap Cities, so that goes to speak of Warren's acumen potentially in the media sector.
He also was shot.
Yeah. Oh, did I don't know that. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about storytelling and making great Canadian shows. And, I'm not trying to be trade here. It's just our business hinges on the hit. We're in the hit business, so we need to continue to work hard at finding the best writers. I mean, when I lived in Los Angeles for a decade, it was often joked that LA is the 3rd largest Canadian city because all the creators would get big and they go down and become showrunners. And there's a ton, I mean, John, you know this better than me, there's a ton of super talented Canadians. So it's our job as Canadian broadcasters to work within the system, the point system, and find those people that are living in LA and structure the deals. This is all the flexibility we need to make great hit shows. At the end of the day, a hit solves a lot of problems.
Even though our clock has, in fact, said we're out of time, we have time for some questions from the floor, some questions that may be coming in by Twitter. So I'd encourage you, I think the process is to jot your questions down on a sheet of paper and they'll be collected. Awesome. So we'll just take one other cut or kick at Canadian content. So if you were the Canadian policymaker who was looking to figure out a way to create those great Canadian programs, make them successful for a global stage, would you favor cultural or industrial policy or both? Would you focus more on increased job creation or on maintaining intellectual property? Would you focus on identifiably Canadian, or would you go, to emphasize what will sell globally? How would you weight those different criteria if you had the unenviable role of trying to reconcile all those competing policy objectives? Heather, why don't you start?
I think I'd go with identifiably Canadian, and very simply because if you're asking taxpayers to fund this, then funding the global ambitions of a generic piece of content is really not the job of the taxpayer or the public policymaker. So I do think you have to commit to supporting, promoting Canadian content and Canadian creators.
I would generally head in the same direction for that reason. And additionally, Heather's mentioning earlier the topic of consumer versus citizen. And our federal treasury has lots of different industries that it could choose to fund. There's lots of other compelling parts of our economy, lots of other national priorities, and we're not the only thing, folks, by the way. And and if we fail to think about our role as citizens, if we fail to think about the distinctively Canadian part of it, we will lose the moral argument that says this is an industry worth supporting that creates smart above-the-neck jobs. And also, this industry, while we make content, and that's the focus of this discussion, is also very connected to the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure. And that infrastructure is an essential part of delivering healthcare and education and banking services. They're all interconnected. And but when I think about that, I think about the word citizen, not consumer.
I think to Heather's point, and so by the way, Lisa, I will talk about what I mean by a secure rights market tomorrow at lunchtime when I do that.
That's
so
good
I wouldn't
marketing.
do it here. But I think, we see two perspectives on that. I think there's times for really distinctly Canadian, obviously Canadian values and stories and things of that sort. But I also, and I suspect John may echo, there's times that you need to make it Canadian in that it's just great storytelling, compelling characters, really, sort of captivating scenery and things of that sort. But if you make it too Canadian, it may limit the global appeal. And so I think that there's a balance. We definitely, when we're working with both the producers and when we're working with partners around the world, that comes into the dialogue.
John, what's your take on trying to reconcile all those competing objectives?
I think it's really challenging, but Canada's seen, unfortunately, more as a manufacturing business in our creative industry than it has been a creative hotbed. And I can tell you that because I talk to broadcasters around the world, and they love Canada because of the tax credits, and they love Canada because of the low dollar right now. But we have to figure out a way to create more of a creative infrastructure in Canada. So we don't have that brain drain. So all those LA-based Canadian showrunners and other, creative talent, that they're in LA partly because of the weather, but they're also there because it is an exciting place to be because they see creative risk-taking. They see the opportunities and the upside that they have. So we have to figure out a way, and I don't have the answers, but to create a system where, one, there's more ownership of Canadian content within the Canadian system. The distribution rights don't keep, flowing outside of Canada for the top Canadian shows that are funded by the Canadian Media Fund and the tax credit system and license fees. We've got to figure that out so that really you're building an infrastructure in Canada that can support the kind of risk-taking that we need in order to create those hits that everyone on this panel needs in order to survive.
Doug?
I'd take maybe a different tact. I think we need a vital and profitable media and broadcasting industry in Canada. We need to make money that sustains the ability to reinvest and to grow. And right now, I think everybody in broadcasting is looking at really challenging revenue scenarios, negative. And so it needs to be understood that in addition to public policy, profitability is the essence too. They've got to work hand in hand. It can't be one or the other.
It's a shame as a broadcast executive, you spend more time cutting jobs than you do reading scripts.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question that has come from the app for Kevin and for Heather. Why do broadcasters not show more Canadian feature films?
Well, it's a huge challenge, and part of the reason is a CMF reason, and I know that it's being looked at, and the film policy and the factor weights around English language films. There's been proposals, in fact, from the CMPA, I think, that we support that are suggesting getting more in line with what the French system does, which is a 5% of budget rather than 12.5%. So that would make it more attractive for broadcasters. And it's just a very fundamental economics piece, which is you're buying 100 minutes and you're paying a fee that you can never hope to recoup. I mean, it's just
You mean
you're not buying a series, right?
The license fees are too big. The license fees are too high.
The license fees, and particularly if you want to be a trigger in any way or participate in the financing of a film, the economics are not as favorable as investing in a series.
But
but we do show Canadian films. We do show, I believe, at least 12 features. We mostly focus on them in the summertime at this point. I would love to do it. Obviously, it's core to the public broadcaster to support Canadian filmmakers as well as Canadian television makers.
And I guess, Lisa, we proudly support Canadian film with TMN and with Super Écran. And so those are our vehicles. And I think a significant amount of our investment there, and I think the vast majority, if not all, Canadian films getting produced have access to those platforms. And so that's our vehicle.
So if they want to watch Canadian films, subscribe to TMN or the Movie Central West. There's a little blatant plug for pay.
Well done, Doug.
Thank you.
Lisa, we have a question out here in the audience.
Great.
Over here. Hi there. My name is Reynolds Maston. I'm with the CMPA. And the reason why I'm up here is because it's a term of my employment contract. Whenever a senior broadcasting executive says something negative about terms of trade, I have to get up to the mic and offer a rebuttal. So just to be responsive to what Doug was saying, is each deal a snowflake? Is it unique? Absolutely. Do broadcasters require flexibility as well as producers in the deals that they do? Absolutely. Are terms of trade nonetheless essential? Absolutely. And the reason why they are is that even with the 4 private broadcaster signatories with whom we have a deal, you represent roughly 84% of the English language viewing market. You enjoy massive leverage in the individual negotiations that you do with broadcasters and producers. And our members' experience certainly has been that when cutting-edge license terms are proposed by broadcasters, it's producers who tend to bleed. It's invariably at their expense. And that's not surprising given the market dynamics. You have leverage, you want to exercise that leverage, and terms of trade is a mechanism to somewhat redress that imbalance. And in an era of light-handed regulatory intervention, I think the underappreciated beauty and elegance of terms of trade is that we don't ask the regulator to prescribe license fees or license terms or what the rights should be. All that we ask of the Commission is that once every 5 years they write a single sentence in their PN for the group license renewal, as well as for CPC, of course, saying, you, the market actors, get to the table and get a deal done. We won't prescribe the terms. You know best what the terms should be. You figure it out. And then when the deal is concluded, the other thing we ask of the Commission is that the deal be a condition of license to incentivize all of the parties to abide by those terms. We think that represents the pinnacle of light-handed regulatory intervention, and we hope that the CRTC will do what it did 3.5 years ago and have that same requirement the next time around.
So I'm inferring there isn't a question there.
That was a
just
point.
assumed it would stimulate a response.
No, that's fine. That's it.
Can I make a comment about that? Because I agree. I think there should be some terms of trade conditions, and as a proud producer, member of the CMPA, absolutely. But the other thing that is even better than terms of trade is great content. And I have done deals where we benefited from the terms of trade in terms of making sure that hopefully we get fair market value for the rights that we are licensing in Canada. I've also done deals on non-content shows where I've had even more leverage because it's something that they really wanted. And when they really wanted, they'll pay more, and the deals are even better. So again, my theme here is, as Canadian producers, yes, there should be, to Michael's point, it should be some kind of fair market. But the best way of determining a fair market is when you have something they really want. And you can do that by thinking about our business on a global basis and creatively, as much as we look to the regulatory system in Canada and the Canadian content system. Producers in Canada are as good as any producer anywhere in the world, and we can make great content, Canadian content or otherwise, in Canada with great Canadian talent. And if it's really, really good and it's really compelling and you've got multiple bidders around the world for those shows, those terms of trade become irrelevant.
And can I just make a brief comment? I'm not going to debate this man's point of view because everybody's entitled to their point of view. I think the philosophy that I would put forward is that there needs to be a collaborative partnership between producers and broadcasters. As I say, we've been producing for 45 years, so I'm eating what I'm cooking. But the whole tone of the conversations the last couple of years have been sort of, I don't want to say adversarial, but they weren't really collaborative in nature. At the end of the day, we are all successful if we work together and make a great show. And I think that's the root of the note, saying that every deal's like a snowflake. I appreciate that you need to be fair, and this is the term of the moment, and having some kind of template protects certainly many. But the best producers, the ones that have the best ideas, they're pretty creative in how they're working with all of us. And I think that there's a realization that, and I wish every producer had this realization, that we all win when we win together. And walk a mile in my shoes, and I'll walk a mile in yours.
So I have one last question that came in through Twitter, which is from somebody who's asking, so what are the key skills that you guys are looking for when you're hiring new people? So the good news is, having heard this discussion, we have people who want to come and work in what is an amazing sector. And they're asking specifically, so what could universities and colleges do differently to produce graduates that were ready for you guys to hire? So Kevin, really quick.
Yeah, great question. We just commissioned a show called Letterkenny, which we're really excited about. We announced it today. It's a cool example of kind of a lower budget film done for you or series done for YouTube that we've picked up, and we're going to shoot for television. We're not sure how and where we're going to window it. Crave will definitely be a element. So I do think amidst a lot of the negativity, these new platforms are enabling creative minds to get their work viewed in a way that may have been a lot harder to run through the gauntlet to get something looked at in the past. And so I'd say stick with it. The second thing is, though, that is maybe sometimes lost because of who we are here in this room. We produce a ton of content that's not scripted, and so we are very excited about what our producers are doing, what our on-air personalities are doing on shows like Marilyn Dennis, The Social, E-Talk, Daily Planet, and all of our folks in that stream to work the social network to drive audiences up, which is working, and to keep that content fresh and relevant and engaging. And those audiences are as important to us as our scripted audiences are.
So Heather, when you're hiring new folks, what skills are you looking for at the CBC?
I'm not sure it's a question of new skills. You're always looking for creativity. You're always looking for people with curiosity. You're always looking for people with passion. And because you're hiring, and I'm hiring across news and radio and digital and entertainment, it's all of those things. It's not a. I don't think you can say I'm primarily looking for people with digital skills. Most of the people who come to any employer today, if you're under 30, that's table stakes. You have those digital skills, so it's not a thing you're privileging. I think the biggest challenge that we're facing is how do you hire new young people when you're in an industry that is confronted with the economic challenges where layoffs are more the order of the day than hiring?
So Michael, you were talking with great pride of the team you've put together. So what are you looking for when you go out to build that team?
The same skills, the very same skills we were looking for 10, 20, or 30 years ago.
And you're finding them.
Critical and creative thinking and the ability to speak and write effectively.
And Doug?
That last writing note is interesting. I mean, we recruit from creative sources, you know, Sheridan and others. We go Ryerson, we go to the Ivy Business School for undergrads. And I am always remarkable when I look at some of the letters I get from some of these applicants. I'm thinking, oh my God, did you not go to English class when you were in high school? I mean, it's unbelievable. So I personally, I look for a great cover letter.
Right.
If someone really puts some time into writing a good letter off the top, that gets my attention right away. And then extracurricular activities. I don't care what area they're in, but even if they're into sports or music, in addition to having good grades, I mean, just a well-balanced individual.
Kevin, can I just add, one thing is, the younger talent coming into the industry, find that ability. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, and don't be afraid to really agitate for change. There's a fabulous tension between all of the habits that we know are happening in the user-consumer marketplace and what new platforms are creating, and the tension of running a business and paying for it and monetizing it. And I think that, you know, sometimes I don't want the gray hairs on the panel who have to pay for everything and run a business and deliver. I'm sure there's none in there, Heather. I don't want that to ever dissuade the energy and the agitation for change. When those two meet in the middle, that's when great things can happen.
Well, that's a great note to leave things on. Thanks to each of you for really participating so well.
So thanks very much to everyone on the panel and the unofficial additional panelist, Reynolds Maston. Thanks to you as well. And that ends the live streaming session. So goodbye to everybody. So we're about to go into the breakout sessions, accessing the U.S. market and strategies to grow, monetize, and migrate your audience. And again, there are a couple of new things that you need to know about before we break. So this year, we're actually going to have an overflow room. So if you find that you can't get access to the session that you want to go to because it's packed, just go right across the hall to the Nova Scotia and Newfoundland rooms, and we'll be showing the session on closed circuit television. So you can watch it and you can tweet your questions or use the app to get your questions in. We'll be making a call at the very last minute in terms of which breakout is going to be on the closed circuit, so just bear with us as we go through that process. Also, if you find that you want to be at both breakouts at the same time and you can't because they're both so great, all of the breakouts are being filmed and they will be online and available to delegates within 24 hours so that you can get all the content you're paying for, even though you can't be in two breakouts at the same time. Also, this year we've programmed a lunch with thing. So certain lucky delegates have signed up to have lunch with a special industry guest. So just to give you some instructions on that, when you come back for lunch, the lunch with tables will be right here at the front, and they'll have a sign with the industry guest's name and company affiliation. So just go sit at the table for the guest that you signed up with. There will be a list of the registered people at the table and with the industry delegates so they know who's supposed to be sitting with them, so no sneaking in. So that's lunch with. Also, check out the Shaw Media Delegates Lounge across the way. We've made it much more meeting friendly this year with little one-on-one tables and groups, little nooks for smaller meetings. There's a bar in there as well and charging stations for all kinds of devices, so please do check it out. Lastly, apologies for the construction noise this morning. I believe we've taken care of it. Everybody who's making the noise is now dead. So I'm pretty sure I may have missed a couple, but I think I got them all. So please do enjoy the networking break. It's coming up. It's sponsored by Aver Media Finance. The breakouts will start at 11:30 sharp. Thank you so much. Thanks again to the panel.